values. Now you can watch your values too. Let's face it, cable TV is anti-American.
This is what it looks like when a president fails in every way.
They support liberal causes.
The worst you can say about the Democrats is they're too pure.
Unpatriotic speech.
The truth is under daily assault from the President of the United States.
And the undermining of freedom.
If you vote for Trump, you are the bad guy.
A lot of people would find it hard to believe that the man who just said that tweeted very recently, it's a total hoax. It's a taxpayer charade.
Oh, I think that looking into me and the campaign, look, I have nothing to do. This was set up by the Democrats. There is no collusion between me and my campaign and the Russians. The other thing is the Russians did not affect the vote, and everybody seems to think that.
There is an investigation underway, though, an FBI investigation. Is that a charade?
Well, I don't know if it's an FBI or if it's, there's so many investigations. I don't know if it's an FBI investigation or if it's Congress, if it's the Senate.
Well, James Comey testified there was an FBI investigation.
Yeah, but I think they're also helping the House and the Senate. So you probably have FBI, but you have House, you have Senate. They have other investigations.
But when you put out tweets, it's a total hoax, it's a taxpayer charade, and you're looking for a new FBI director, are you not sending that person a message to lay off?
No, I'm not doing that. I think that we have to get back to work, but I want to find out, I want to get to the bottom. If Russia hacked, if Russia did anything having to do with our election, I want to know about it.
Well, there's already intelligence from virtually every intelligence agency that, yes, that happened.
I'll tell you
that's a lie. We found out 17 of those agencies was bullshit. Turned out to be 4. Turned out to be James Clapper, James Brennan, FBI, James Comey, and who was the other one? Oh, what was it? NSA? It was 4 agencies, not 17 agencies. So we know that was shit. And that came out. Now what, fucking ballhead?
If Russia or anybody else is trying to interfere with our elections, I think it's a horrible thing, and I
just respond with terms of, because it's personal. I was about a year ago on the baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia, and I was throwing balls to Steve Scalise, who was playing second base, and Jeff Duncan and I, who was playing short, decided we'd try to beat DC traffic, and we left probably about 5 minutes before Steve was shot. And as we were leaving, we were getting into a car, and a man who we didn't know came up to us and said, "Are those Republicans on the field?" We didn't think anything of it. We're like, "Yeah, it's the Republican team." We pull away. 2 minutes later, he grabs a rifle, sets up on the third base line. I would have, thank God I wasn't there, because I would have been in that line. And he shoots Steve, and he would have shot 10 or 15 Republicans. And so he was motivated by anti-Trump rage. He was a raving lunatic. But here's the thing. If there were a Fox News viewing Trump supporter who did that for Democrats, the media would view it as the biggest thing in world history. There, they swept it under the rug. People didn't even talk about it after a week. So this incivility, I don't think it's a two-way street. I don't blame Donald Trump for that. I blame that guy and all his left-wing friends for whipping up this frenzy. And I'm leading the fight right now in Congress to censure Maxine Waters for her conduct.
Departure from the FBI. Was the FBI able to confirm any criminal allegations contained in the Steele document?
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that's a question I can answer in an open setting because it goes into the details of the investigation.
There's a lot of questions that still are surrounding all of this. That was the former FBI Director James Comey back in June at a Senate Intelligence hearing being asked about the infamous Trump dossier. Now the House Intel Committee is issuing subpoenas to the FBI and the DOJ. They want to know more about the origin of that document and what it was used for by the FBI. They're reportedly calling on now FBI Director Christopher Wray and Attorney General Jeff Sessions to testify if the information that they have requested is not provided. Here now, one of the people leading that investigation, Congressman Trey Gowdy, the House Intelligence Committee. Good to have you here this evening, Congressman.
Thank you.
So they want to see, they want to know, you want to know, and the American people want to know, if this dossier, which was later discredited or couldn't be substantiated at the very least, was used as the leverage to unmask people in the Trump campaign, correct?
Well, was it used to initiate either a law enforcement or counterintelligence investigation? Was that the evidentiary basis that the Bureau used to launch either a criminal probe or a counterintelligence probe? And it's fine if it were, if it weren't, as long as you let me know how you vetted the information in the dossier. So I need the Bureau and DOJ to say either we relied upon it or we did not rely upon it. And if we did rely upon it, this is how we vetted the information before we used it.
I mean, that's pretty significant. You know, you want to understand that if this dossier, and also the generation of that dossier, what did they know about the generation of that, and who was essentially commissioning, who was asking for that dossier, right?
Who commissioned it is important. What's most important to me, I mean, if a friend is capable of telling a lie and an enemy is capable of telling the truth, who commissioned it is important, but I'm much more interested in whether or not the underlying data was accurate. And the only way to know whether it's accurate is for the Bureau to investigate the sources and the sub-sources. And then I would think everyone would want to know, did our premier law enforcement agency, the FBI, rely on this document to initiate a criminal probe, or in court filings and representations before a court? That is an eminently legitimate question, and I really don't know why it's taken the department this long to answer.
And so Jeff Sessions is now the Attorney General in charge of the DOJ, and he's having trouble getting the answers to this information?
I'd be shocked if it's made it up to General Sessions level yet, but I bet it will shortly, because next week is coming, and that's when House Intel Committee wants either, what we want are the documents. We don't want the drama, but if you're not going to produce the documents, you need to come in person, explain to us why the entity that created the FBI is not entitled to provide oversight over the FBI.
Yeah.
Democrats were calling on the president to cancel the summit. We also heard from Senator John McCain, who said if President Trump is not prepared to hold Putin accountable, the summit in Helsinki should not move forward.
John McCain. Typical John McCain. He was reaching for that brass ring of being the United States president so badly that he was willing to betray his own party's nominee, which is Trump, that he was willing to give the FBI this fake dossier, because there's what, like 3 or 4 different copies of it. He was willing to vote down the repeal of Obamacare. He was the lone vote on that killed the Obamacare repeal. So you can thank John McCain for that. The man is an absolute walking, talking tragedy. He's dying of cancer. You know, it's in his brain. And he's, you know, for somebody whose brain is supposedly cancer-ridden, and I know for a fact I do chemo, and my brain isn't what it should be because of the chemo. This guy hasn't been in Washington in 10 months, and he is still collecting a paycheck. He is still getting the benefits of being a senator, and he won't step down. That is just uncalled for. 10 months of absenteeism. What job in the world could you be gone for 10 months and still get paid for?
Obviously, the summit is moving forward, but will the president hold Putin accountable? And I don't mean just ask him if he did it or if the Russians did it.
It's the first time he's meeting Putin in person on a one-on-one talk, Mr. John Carl. Are you really this fucking stupid? That is probably one of the most stupid questions. Go over there and give Putin a bloody nose is what he's saying. And that ain't how shit works. If you think you can do a better job, then you need to run for president.
Is he actually going to confront President Putin with the evidence that it was Russian?
Trump is not a fucking lawyer, you asswipe. What's he supposed to do? Go over there, well, you did this and this and this and this and this, and here's the evidence of it. Putin's going to look at him and say, who are you?
Interference, Russian government interference with our election.
Well, look, you have 2 indictments by the Justice
Department already. I think the Russians are well aware of that. How this conversation is going to go, I think, will be determined by the two parties. We have asked, and the Russians have agreed, that it will be basically unstructured. We're not looking for concrete deliverables here. I think it's very important that the president have a direct one-on-one conversation with President Putin. That's how this is going to start off. And I might say that every European leader that we've met with on this trip, including most recently on Friday, Prime Minister Theresa May of the United Kingdom, has said they support this meeting going forward. The British have significant concerns about the Russian use of a chemical agent against people here in Great Britain, and as they pointed out, that constitutes a chemical weapons attack against the nuclear power. Prime Minister May was very strong in her conversation with the president about that, and I'm sure the president has that in mind as well. There are going to be a lot of very difficult issues on the agenda here with President Putin, and I think President Trump is prepared to raise all of them.
Then I'm not personally under investigation.
Those are the three things he asked. Yes, sir.
You know, this investigation is full of leaks left and right. I mean, we've learned more from the newspapers sometimes than we do from our open hearings, for sure. Do you ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the president was not personally under investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans and the leadership of Congress knew that and have known that for weeks?
I don't know. I find matters that are briefed to the Gang of Eight are pretty tightly held, in my experience.
Finally, who are those senior leaders at the FBI that you shared these conversations with?
As I said in response to Senator Feinstein's question, Deputy Director, my Chief of Staff, General Counsel, the Deputy Director's Chief Counsel, and then more often than not, the number 3 person at the FBI who's the Associate Deputy Director, and then quite often the head of the National Security Branch.
Senator Wyden.
Is this: can a sitting president be indicted or criminally prosecuted? Again, there is no clear answer, but it has never happened. However, twice the Department of Justice has issued legal opinions stating, quote, indictment or criminal prosecution of a sitting president would be unconstitutional because it would impermissibly interfere with the president's ability to carry out his constitutionally assigned functions.
Were actually people that belonged to the FSB, which is the former KGB. These are they're CIA, right? Russia's CIA. So these were people that were connected, and they received $500,000, and Bill Clinton specifically for a speech, $200,000 from a speech.
By the way, that speech came from a Russian government. The $500,000, which was twice his normal speaking fee, and it came from a Russian government-aligned investment bank, and it came at a time that seems suspicious, and especially in terms of the Uranium One deal.
Yeah, absolutely, and if you look at the hearing, Grassley held a hearing this year that focused in on this bank, and this is a statement from one of the officials, and as noted by Grassley in the letter that he sent to all of these people who have put these lawsuits against President Trump. He said, well, if you just look at this bank alone, Renaissance is a Russian investment bank whose senior officers include former FSB Russian intelligence personnel. As such, sources have described the bank as an extension of the Russian government, as most all of the banks in Russia are controlled in some manner by the Kremlin. Yet, mum's the word, nobody made a big deal about the fact that, former President Bill Clinton received $500,000 for a speaking engagement from these folks, and it was filed in a joint income tax return while she was Secretary of State. That should raise concern.
Well, look at Qatar. I mean, they donated $1 million to the Clinton Foundation on Bill Clinton's birthday while Clinton was Secretary of State. Hillary, the nation, was the recipient of approximately, $4.3 billion. And, here's the thing that really bothered me is, the Saudis gave $10 million, and that was a 97% increase, et cetera, of money that they had given in the past when she becomes Secretary of State. And, and she's the champion of women's rights and gays' rights and religious freedom, but look at how the Saudis persecute women and persecute and kill gays and lesbians and persecute Christians and Jews. So it's great hypocrisy, but it's probably a lot deeper.
True. true. And remember, there was a lot of concern, too. You mean Saudi Arabia, the majority of the 9/11, I mean, if we go back all the way to September 11th, 2001, they were from Saudi Arabia. You know, Osama bin Laden was from Saudi Arabia. We know that there were a lot of issues in the kingdom with Wahhabism, which was the extreme form of Islamic belief. And so there were a lot of concerns there, and nobody really addressed those issues. We know we've been partnering with our Saudi partners and allies as well, trying to find a way to mitigate this, but we haven't been able to. If you just go back to Qatar really quickly, I mean, that was, think about this, during that time, she got the $1 million for the Clinton Foundation on Clinton's birthday. They got eventually $4.3 billion worth of sales. They were the recipient of that. That was a 1,482% increase.
Wow.
Since prior to Clinton being Secretary of State.
Interview, Julian Assange hinted that a murdered Democratic National Committee staffer could have been a source of information for WikiLeaks.
Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. As a 27-year-old works for the DNC, who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago.
That was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No.
The entire role of Fusion GPS here is coming more clearly into focus. There were so many copies of this dossier going to the Justice Department from planters that it's hard to keep track of them. The alleged journalist David Korn with Mother Jones was the source of a copy. That's the problem with crack. It often has corn in it. We also know that we had John McCain passing a copy of this in. McCain should be forced to answer under oath what he knew about the origins of the dossier and whether he knew it was fabricated when he passed it on to the UN. If he is too sick to answer those questions, his staffer who did the legwork should be compelled to testify.
Yep.
There were so many copies of this poison, of this fabricated dossier going into the FBI. It's hard to keep track of them. One from Orr to Stroke, one from Korn to the FBI, one from McCain to the FBI. This is beginning to look like a Marx Brothers movie, and I think that they are in retreat. We will be.
Hi, I'm Star Parker, and the left's lack of civility is out of control. I believe that the left and all of those associated with the left have reached a new low when it comes to the way that they approach other Americans, fellow Americans who disagree with them. We want Maxine Waters censured, especially right now. She reached a new low to make some wild statements about her supporters going out and attacking people that are working in administration. The challenge with that particular call to action is it's gone viral on social media. They're talking about things like destroying people's food when they go into restaurants, and it doesn't stop at just those that are working for the Trump administration. We're finding in my personal space as a commentator those types of attacks. Others are finding that they can't ride an Uber because of these personal attacks if they have on a MAGA hat or any other expression. So we reached into another place in our history similar to what happened during the Civil Rights Movement.
Correct.
And we need to tone it down. This is not America's culture, and so she cannot reflect that side of America that was so wild during the Civil Rights Movement.
Star Parker, you're correct.
I will not take your rifle. I will not take your shotgun away. I will not take your shotgun away. I will not take your rifle away.
I've been very good.
Remember that? That's Obama in one of his many lies.
For gun manufacturers. And at no point have I ever proposed confiscating guns from responsible gun owners.
We can now confirm that former President Barack Obama did want to take your guns the whole time. How do we know? Well, Time magazine just released their top 100 most influential people of 2018. Featured on that list were the far left survivors of the Parkland shooting. And who wrote the Times article praising them? That's right, Barack Obama.
Insurance policy. I think it was an FBI plant seeking to me, but he gives away the game when he says he wants $2 million for negative information on Hillary. When I tell him I don't have $2 million, he says it's not your money I want, it's Donald Trump's money. I think it's the first known example of the Peter Strzok insurance policy. I think it was an FBI plant seeking to entrap me and to compromise Trump.
He asked for your loyalty. And you said you would be loyally honest.
Honestly loyal.
Honestly loyal. He asked you on one occasion to let the Mike Flynn thing go because he was a good guy. By the way, you're aware that he said the exact same thing in the press the next day. He's a good guy, he's been treated unfairly, et cetera, et cetera. So I imagine your FBI agents read that.
I'm sure they did.
The president's wishes were known to them, certainly by the next day when he had a press conference with the prime minister. But going back, the three requests were, number one, be loyal. Number two, let the Mike Flynn thing go. He's a good guy. He's been treated unfairly. And number three, can you please tell the American people what these leaders in Congress already know, what you already know, what you've told me 3 times, that I'm not personally under investigation?
Which all of the Congress members knew that were on that committee. Dianne Feinstein, Chuck Schumer, Adam Schiff, Devin Nunes, all of those guys knew, but nobody said a word. They let that Russian investigation go on now for another 11 months.
Those are the 3 things he asked. Yes, sir.
You know, this investigation is full of leaks left and right. I mean, we've learned more from the newspapers sometimes than we do from our open hearings, for sure. Do you ever wonder why, of all the things in this investigation, the only thing that's never been leaked is the fact that the president was not personally under investigation, despite the fact that both Democrats and Republicans and the leadership of Congress knew that and have known that for weeks?
I don't know. I find matters that are briefed to the Gang of 8 are pretty tightly held, in my experience.
Finally, who are those senior leaders at the FBI that you shared these conversations with?
As I said in response to Senator Feinstein's question, Deputy Director, my Chief of Staff, General Counsel, the Deputy Director's Chief Counsel, and then more often than not, the number 3 person at the FBI who's the Associate Deputy Director, and then quite often the head of the National Security Branch.
Senator Wyden.
Because we can't get on legislation. In 2013, we were in a similar situation to this. The minority party, at that point being the Republicans, were slowing down the process in the Senate on nominations to the Democratic Party, at that point the majority. And so Republicans and Democrats sat down together and said, this is a problem. We cannot get to legislation. Republicans and Democrats together with 70-plus votes made a 2-year rule change in the Senate, the 113th Congress. It was a simple rule change. 2 hours of debate for a district court judge, 8 hours of debate for just about everybody else, 30 hours of debate for Circuit Court, Supreme Court, and Cabinet nominations. It was a bipartisan agreement that worked very well for that 2-year time period. And then at the end of that 2-year time period, it had a sunset on it, and it expired. The hope was we would relearn how to be able to do this. Now, I wasn't here in the Senate at that time, but I've talked to multiple people about that process. What happened instead was, during the first year of that, there continued to be ongoing frustration, and so my Democratic colleagues used what's called affectionately the nuclear option, to be able to change the rules of the Senate to say that they can bring individuals with only 51 votes, not 60, and then they use the rule on top of that they've changed to bring people at greater speed, which they did. And for the rest of the next year, used it that way. We now come to this time period. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about in the frustration of this. From let me go back and try to confirm my number to make sure that I get it right for all the Senate history here. From 1967 until 2012, there were 46 cloture votes in vote. That means they requested a cloture vote and it went all the way to be a vote. 46 of those on judges and executive branch from 1967 to 2012. Last year, there were 46 cloture votes in this body just in 1 year. What was from 1967 to 2012 before the total number Democrats did to Republicans in 1 year last year. The statement keeps coming up over and over again. Why can't we get on legislation? Because each day is full with dead time debating nominations like what passed today unanimously in the Senate, but we had to have cloture time set aside for it. This has got to be fixed. The rules of the Senate are set by the senators. In 2013, the senators stood up and said, this has to stop, and fixed it. I am recommending again that the Senate once again implement the same rule that Democrats led Republicans to do in 2013, now in this year, and instead of doing it for one Congress, make it the rule. If it was a good idea for Democrats in 2013 and 14, why is it not a good idea for Republicans and Democrats now? That simple rule is, when we can't agree on a candidate, we would only have 2 hours of debate on a district judge. This week, remembering for the entire week, it took the whole week to do 4 of them. We could do 2 hours of debate for each one if it's a district court judge, 8 hours for just about everybody else, or 30 hours of debate, Supreme Court, Circuit Court, and cabinet level nominations. You would think that that would be a slam dunk. So far, it has not been. For some reason, my Democratic colleagues say that rule was good for us, but it's not good for you. And it's not good for the future of the Senate. I believe that it is. That it was a fair rule then. It's a fair rule now. Enough debating about the rules of the Senate. Let's get on to the business of the Senate and to actually do what the American people sent us here to do. Interestingly enough, there's also a very obscure rule in the Senate called Rule 31, that if at the end of a year there are still nominations that are pending out there, that those nominations would have to be returned to the White House and they'd have to start all over again. Now, the Senate can agree by unanimous consent to say, okay, we understand these are all in process. By unanimous consent, just agree to those things and to be able to hold them on the calendar. Let me give you an example of that. Under President Bill Clinton, at the end of his first year, there were only 13 of his nominations that were sent back to the White House. After the end of George W. Bush's first term, only 2 nominations were returned back to the White House. After President Obama's first term, only 8 were sent back to the White House. After President Trump's first term, 90 were sent back. Let me review again. Bill Clinton, 13. George Bush, 2. President Obama, 8. President Trump, 90. I don't think my Democratic colleagues understand that they're continuing to amp up the volume of obstruction, saying someone's obstructed us in the past, so we're going to do it 10 times to you. Understanding, well, all that leads to is the next time Republicans are in the minority, we do it 10 times again, and it makes this worse. There is a way to fix this. We should come to that mutual agreement. We should resolve the rules of the Senate. We've got to get onto budget. We've got to get onto children's health insurance program. We've got to get onto intelligence issues. We've got to get onto immigration. We've got to get onto infrastructure. We've got to get onto a lot of other things. But we're stuck debating people that should be an easy one for us. I'm recommending to this body what my folks used to say to me. What was good for the goose should be good for the gander. If it was a great rule when Democrats were in the majority, it should be a great rule when Republicans were in majority. Let's just take clean, fair rules, apply it to everyone. Let's move on with the nomination process, and let's get back to the business of doing legislation so we can get this resolved. With that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.